So in this video, I wanted to discuss CBDCs and how a central bank digital currency will cause mass poverty. The reason being is because, at least at the moment now, many people find ways to avoid taxation. And there is something that is called the Laffer curve, which is basically the peak point where people can be taxed before you get lack of production. And so often, working when I used to do a lot of overtime at the hospital, and we used to be really short. And I would say to people, why don't you work overtime this day? And they were like, oh, I already did 2 overtimes for the month. This would be my third, and it's realistically speaking, it's not worth it in the check because then you get taxed so much. The more overtime you do, the more you get taxed because you just get pushed into a higher tax bracket. And so this naturally causes a lack of productivity where people want to be productive, but they realize that most of their productivity is going to be stolen from them, so they just opt out of being productive. This is what you see in socialism. This is what happened in Jamestown. When the people of Jamestown, we're talking about way back, when the people of Jamestown realized, well, somebody else is going to plant the fields. I'm not going to plant the fields because it's just not worth it because someone else is going to be reaping my productivity at my expense. And so people just opted out of working. And this happened in Jamestown. You can look this up. To the point where the people became so unproductive that they were literally boiling their own children as a source of food. That's how far into poverty and lack of productivity people will go. You see this with Native Americans in our time, where the Native Americans have been given land, they've been given money, they've been given things, resources, and overwhelmingly what you see is a lack of productivity. For a lot of people who are like, in the black community that are like, we want reparations. If they were to give reparations, and we already see this with welfare, when you give people welfare, it produces lack of productivity because they can just go and buy the resources and the services that the productive people worked for. So you were working, producing a good, whether it's a cell phone or you were offering a service like me as a nurse, and someone else just stayed home and was given resources, was given money to buy goods and services, which is all that an economy is. What that produces is lack of productivity, and you end up in a socialistic dystopia. At the end of that, you get communism, where the government realizes, because these governments just want to be able to steal from the people. And so as a result, when there is a lack of resources, this is what you saw in Venezuela, it's what you saw in the USSR, it's what you saw in right here, what's it called, Cuba, right? This is typically what these people do. They promise you wealth, they promise you equality, but what they really mean is that you're all going to be equally poor. Just look at the Native Americans, right? The Native Americans live in poverty, abstract poverty. They statistically are the worst group in America. They're just such a small group that you don't hear about them by comparison to, let's say, the black community, which is obviously a much larger group. But when in terms of violence, rape, lack of education, diabetes, violence, murders, theft, hands down, the Native American community, by and large, is the worst community in America. And you can just look at the statistics. It's not even close. And people look at the black community, where the black community has only make up, as they say, 13% of the population, but tend to lean higher when it comes to acts of violence, murders, right? Just look at places like Chicago, right? Baltimore, etc. Because this is what it produces. Welfare produces poverty, hands down. And a CBDC will produce the same result because the government will then be able to directly inject liquidity into the community, albeit even if it's for a limited time, right? If you have your CBDC will decline if you don't use it by X amount of days, it will expire. All that will do, an expiring currency The only thing it will do is it will cause people to rush out and buy anything that isn't nailed down, because that which is not nailed down, that which is nailed down, or not nailed down, I should say, that doesn't expire, is more valuable than the central bank digital currency that expires. And so what we'll do is it will cause mass inflation. And you'll have, and of course, this is for the purpose of people who are like, well, when we had the gold standard, you had the booms and busts. Like, we don't have boom and bust right now. But this is the point where when you have a gold standard and you have a finite amount of gold, the most productive people tend to end up with all the gold, and then everybody else who doesn't have gold fall into poverty. This same thing is sort of being pseudo fixed with a central bank digital currency, because once all the currency is gone, well, then they can just create more currency and directly inject it into the system instead of waiting for the banks to do it, where the banks find people who at the very least will give them an interest rate, right? I'm lending money out and I'm lending that money at an interest, right? So I'm getting something back. And so they look for people who typically have good credit or who have good money management, who are more than likely going to pay back that loan plus the interest. But the government doesn't want that under the guise of equality. But at the end of the day, this will lead to abstract poverty in many countries that go this route. Because once the government can directly inject liquidity into the economy, this is what the people will beg for. As they say, there is nothing more permanent than a short-term government solution, right? A short-term government program. Perfect example was the child tax credit during the pandemic, where the people were getting like $300 per kid, and then they were like, well, this is only for 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, or however long it was, the people got used to it, and they got used to that new standard, money that they did not work for, to purchase goods and services that they did not contribute towards. Because that's all an economy is. It's like a potluck. And if you have 10 people and they say, hey, you're going to bring this, and you're going to bring that, and you're going to bring this, and all 10 of us are going to bring something so that we can all divvy it up, and then 100 people show up, and only 10 people brought stuff, well, then what you end up with are shortages. And that's what a CBDC will do. See, they think that this is going to be the end-all, be-all, that they can control and manipulate economies and peoples, and it's going to completely backfire. It will work in the beginning, and people's behavior will change. Because the people who want control will offer the CBDC for your compliance, right? If you just, let me scan your eye, get X amount of this digital currency that you'll be able to use to go out and purchase stuff. People will run out and do that, meaning that they'll be that much less productive. And the people who can get by with just the CBDC and not work, they're going to do it. They're going to do it. And you'll see many people fall into abstract poverty. And this will be the result. Crime will go out of control. This is why at the end of the day, they need to watch you. This is why in China, everywhere you go, there's a camera. There's a camera there. You're going to look at the camera to be identified. Because at the end of the day, this is the result of having such a tight grip on an economy that should be free. It leads to poverty. And this is what you're seeing in the United States. This is why people can't afford rent. People can't afford to buy food. You're seeing people who are working full-time not even able to support themselves. And what do the people do? Do the people say we need smaller government and we need more freedom? No. They say we need more government and we need more restrictions. We want the government to get involved with housing because we need affordable housing. What does that do? It causes less houses because we have less people that want to be productive to make houses or any product. This was very similar in Pennsylvania with Pennsylvania wanted to put a cap on travel nurses. The only thing that will happen is travel nurses will just not go there. That's it. Because if I earn less money leaving my full-time job to go travel to PA to be a nurse where we're operating a shortage, Why would I go there? Why would I go there? And so the market dictates via supply and demand. And so more people will say, hey, look at all these nurses making all this money. I want to go to school for nursing. Or you have people who are 2-year degrees, like, I need to finish my bachelor's degree so I can go be a travel nurse, etc. The market will then fix itself. The supply will come down. Or, which is what's happening now, they'll say, you know what? There's not enough RNs. We're going to have to start using LPNs, which is what happens at the hospital where I'm at now, where you have 8 patients as an RN, but then they throw in an LPN to try to offset having that many patients. It really doesn't work, but that's what happens. When you have supply and demand shortages, eventually people will say, well, when we need to do something, we need to do something. The something will be restricted by the government, use of central bank digital currency, because they'll have complete and utter control. They'll see everything that you buy and they'll see everything that you spend on. And if they don't like you buying something, they're going to say, you can't buy that. You've eaten too much meat, you're cut off. And so what will happen is it will lead people into poverty because people won't want to use a central bank digital currency. But it's when it's the only thing that you have, people would rather be poor than go out and work hard. Jamestown proved that, and many other countries have proven that when push comes to shove, look at the Native Americans, people would rather live in abstract poverty, in complete squalor, than go out there and work and put in a hard day if they can vote for free money. That will be the outcome moving forward. This is why for a long time they said we should not go this route because it will be disastrous going with negative interest. But this is what happens when you live in a fake economy and you're completely reliant on cheap labor overseas and currency that you manipulate. Over time, it eventually will lead to a disaster. And they know that. And so that's why they're putting in all these systems of control, central bank digital currency, global US passports, that little eye thing, what is it called? The world coin, right? We're gonna track your fingerprint, we're gonna track your eye. Everywhere you go, you're gonna have to show that you're human because of AI. This is what you get. This is what you get. And I've said this in numerous videos. Socialism always leads to communism. Always. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.